Welcome to the only daily podcast focusing on compliance news of the day. Each morning, start your day with a cup of coffee and Tom Fox, the voice of compliance, to hear about 4 of the top compliance, corruption, or leadership stories you will need to start your day. The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.
April 16, 2021, the Want Wisdom, Listen edition. And we begin with that lead story in a op-ed piece by David Brooks in the New York Times. He says, wisdom isn't what you think, it's more about listening than talking. And if it's one thing I've learned in my podcast series, 12 O'Clock High, a podcast on business leadership, the key trait of every business leader is to listen. And when you recognize that you're not that special, you can accept what you're able to do and what you're not able to do. And with that piece of insight, then you can move on to learning what you need to do. Wisdom is different than knowledge. Montaigne even pointed this out, that you can be knowledgeable with another person's knowledge, but you can't be wise with another person's wisdom. Wisdom has an embedded moral element. Out of your own moments of suffering comes a compassion regarding the frailty of others. Wise people don't tell us what they do. They start by witnessing our story. It's a great piece, and I would urge you to check it out. Even if you're not a David Brooks fan, I'm a huge David Brooks fan, but this piece is must reading for every chief compliance officer. Next up, from the Wall Street Journal, the U.S. brings the hammer down on Russia in terms of retaliatory measures over election interference, the SolarWinds cyber attack, and other maligning activities, saying he isn't seeking to kick off a cycle of escalation, but it would certainly take more dramatic action and drastic action. Obviously, President Trump was owned by the Russians and would do nothing to protect America from them, but President Biden is not of that ilk, and he will defend America. And he obviously could have gone farther in this situation, but he chose to be proportionate. So Russia's on notice now. The aggressive behavior that they were able to get away with their concordat Trump in the presidency will no longer be tolerated. Interestingly, as reported in the Wall Street Journal, Jeff Bezos says Amazon needs a culture reset for its employees. Although Amazon was successful in defeating a unionizing effort, Bezos said the company needs, quote, a better vision for its employees after a recent, that's end quote, after a recent vote. The voting results were lopsided, and our direct relationship with our employees is strong, but we need a better vision to create value for employees. Interesting that Bezos would say this, but perhaps something good will come out of it when you have a large number of employees who want to be unionized. There may be a cultural reason for that in addition to financial reasons. But interesting that Bezos would see the light on this. And finally, from the Financial Times, Edward Luce, in his Global Insight column, says the end is in sight for the golden age of rich America's tax evasion. $1 trillion here, $1 trillion there, and eventually you're talking real money. And the IRS said that if it collected the money it was currently owed, it would have $1 trillion. That's the shortfall from the IRS. Most of this evasion is carried out by the top 1% of U.S. taxpayers, the group that, of course, complains the most and doesn't certainly let any of its money trickle down. So perhaps Biden will fund the IRS properly, and they can go after the rich American taxpayers who've been evading taxes for years. It would certainly help the U.S. budget. The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network and a proud member of C-Suite Radio. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you'll join me again tomorrow.